Hello and welcome back to the Bird's Eye View podcast. We are here on Thursday, July 4th. Happy Independence Day to any of our American listeners. Happy Thursday to all of our Canadian listeners. I'm your host, Zach Worden, joined as always by Jori Negin-Shecter. And Jori, the Blue Jays are playing very soon, but things have not been going very well.
No, I think that it is a week that is best summarized by a bullpen that is so deeply lacking that you're looking at Jose Cuas pitching leverage innings and breaking records in the process.
Yeah, it really interesting record, like the only pitcher to throw three pitches and hit two batters in a single outing.
Yeah, he made history. So that's exciting. Because he intentionally walks the first guy and then proceeds to give up a base knock and then plunk. It was just, and then of course Zach Pop. It was just everything sucked. But they play today, and that's the beauty of baseball, right? That's
what they say. They play very soon, and I mean, obviously, with that, I don't think we need to get too much into the game stuff. But since the last time we recorded, it's just a ton of news. I mean, it seems like every time we come on, there's 1,000 new storylines to talk about. Let's start with some of the positives, because we're at a point of the year where there haven't been a lot of positives recently, and Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is going to be in his fourth consecutive All-Star game, a third start for him, and he was named Player of the Week last week. Just a really great stretch of play for him. How are you feeling about Vladdy and kind of what the future may hold for him based on this little stretch?
I mean, goodness, it's not even a stretch at this point. This guy has just basically taken the first month and change of his season, which was obviously just incredibly underwhelming, and has turned it around and become a real factor at this point, right? He's got a 143 WRC plus ahead of today's game against the Astros to wrap up the 4-game set. It's really incredible that this guy he's surpassing what he was doing last year. Obviously, the power remains a bit of an issue, but the power is slowly but surely creeping up there. He's up to 13 bombs now. So slowly but surely he's creeping up there. And it's really encouraging, I think, that it seems like he's finding something and he's been able to produce. And I think now this All-Star game nod, which I think was unthinkable even 6 weeks ago, I might even go as far to say that, to now be a very well-deserving All-Star starter, mind you, at a weak first base position, is a really good development, really encouraging development for these Blue Jays.
Yeah, I'm just going to read off some of his June numbers because it might have been one of the best months of his career. I mean, he hit 318, had a 360 OBP, slugged 607. That's good for a 967 OPS, a 173 WRC plus. He hit 8 home runs. He tied the Toronto Blue Jays record for most RBIs in a week. He tied the record, and they had one of those games rained out. So who knows what happens if they play that game in Boston. He had 25 RBIs in the month. He scored 16 runs. He did stop walking a little bit, which I think is interesting. But I mean, when you're doing that much damage in the zone, like, yeah, swing away. You know, the one game where he hit the double down the line, and it was like a Vladimir Guerrero Sr.-esque swing where it's just a great pitch, like low and in, and he just gets the barrel there and drives it down the line. Like, he's been so much fun to watch, and I think that with the way that the season has gone, like him upping his play and upping his watchability, basically, I think is massive for the team. And if he can kind of keep it up, it'll be nice at least to kind of keep that down the stretch and have somebody on the roster that's performing and playing well. That's fun to watch.
Well, to me, it indicates that maybe you do look at maybe extending him, because obviously there have been so many questions, and you don't want to sign a guy at the peak of his value when he's riding such a hot streak. But at the same time, all of a sudden, the discussion maybe is like, hey, we saw the baseline. It wasn't great, but it was playable. And now we've seen the better and the best version of Vlad. Maybe we have a better idea of exactly who he is. And maybe you can be more comfortable giving him some kind of lengthy term, because you're going to have to lock somebody up. I mean, he's still so young, 25 or so. There's no reason not to make an effort. And maybe this winter it is a change of plans, and they do make a really significant, substantial effort to try to retain his services.
Yeah, I want to get your thoughts because it's interesting. Like, say that they do decide to blow it up, but decide to keep Vlad, and obviously you keep him around and hope by the time like 2 3 years when your next window opens, like you still have him locked in when he would be, 27 28 around there, and like that's still supposedly a player's prime, right? So he should still be a productive contributor at that point. And I mean, if you give him like a 12-year contract, like he should age fairly well, like as a potential maybe just by the end of his career, like if you give him a 12-year deal and say the last 5 years are as a DH, like I still think that you would be pretty happy with what he can bring offensively, what he brings as a marketable star in baseball, as a face of the franchise, and as a guy who, one day could be like a level of excellence type player for the franchise. And just having like him be a Toronto Blue Jay for 15 16 years, I think there's a lot of value in that. And I mean, I'm kind of curious what you think as far as that goes, as far as like being able to get him locked up and having like him implanted in the Blue Jays lineup for the next 12 years.
Well, here's what I'm wondering is how much of this is recency bias.
Well,
Because
yes.
like a month and a half ago, we were derisively calling him Vladdy Arias. But all of a sudden, he's turned into like an actually great contact hitter and has sustained this success and has found a little bit of power over the last little bit as well. So maybe this is as high as we're going to be on Vladimir Guerrero Jr. throughout the rest of the season. But I think still there is something to be said about that success that he is having and the value that him being a long-term Blue Jay would ultimately have. I don't know. I'm not going to pretend to know if this is a guy that they should extend. Listen, it's a first base DH with limited defensive value. You've tried him in third. It did not work, even slightly. And he's in the midst of one of the hottest stretches of his career. So you're going to have these rose tinted glasses when looking at the production that he's provided for your team of late. Maybe he's just a streaky guy. I mean, it's really just tough to say. But to me, I do agree that having him either locked up in some capacity or making a really concerted effort to do so would bring value outside of just discussing his pure on-field talents.
It's interesting. I'm looking. I just pulled up the list of every single month of his career and sorted it by WOBA, and the list goes, like June 2021, March, April 2021, September, October 2021, and then we have June 2024, May 2021, August 2019, and then May 2024. So like he's been like really good for 2 out of the 3 months this season, or I guess it's yeah, two of the 3 months this season. So I mean, like I feel fairly confident that, we can say that like it's recency bias, but it has been like a 2 month stretch. And we've been waiting for that, right? Because we know what the quality of contact numbers suggest the type of hitter that he should be. We just haven't necessarily seen the results. And now we're kind of seeing those results turn. So I feel like if you do get like the hitter that he's been, obviously he's not going to be, well, he's not likely to be the same hitter that he was at when he won Player of the Week over the course of the next 3 months. But I think if we can kind of see him maintain the level of play that we saw over the entire month of June, like that's or the kind of a combination of the June May stuff, that's a type of player that you probably feel good about extending and feel about that. But if he kind of does have like a month or two where he does slip up the rest of the way, then I would say that kind of goes back into question.
Well, of course, obviously, if he's not going to perform, then the questions are going to continue to percolate because he's been so inconsistent basically throughout his career, dating back to his MVP runner-up season. Right, this is like a guy that just you never really know exactly what you're gonna get from him. Basically, right? I mean, season to season, the variance has been pretty much incredible. I I wonder here's kind of where I struggle a little bit. to me, and it's an easy comparison to make because they're both Blue Jays. But I think of like a guy like Edwin Encarnacion, who for a number of years was extremely consistent at around a 150 OPS plus guy. I think he was between 145 and 155 for every year of like a 4-year stretch between 2012 and 2015, or maybe even 2016. Like it was a pretty consistent thing with him. And I feel, at least just based on how Vlad is gone, that's probably what you're looking at with him. Maybe slightly weaker. Maybe you're looking at something closer to a 140 WRC plus guy. Now, my question, what kind of contract are you comfortable giving that kind of guy? Because to me, like, you can go long term, you can give him a lot of money, but I have a really hard time giving Edwin Encarnacion 12 years, 300 plus million.
Well, yeah, I think at this point he's definitely not a 300 million type player. Like he's probably like, how would you feel about like 12,250?
I mean, again, like it's not my money. Like I could stomach that. I mean, I think the problem is I don't think Vlad is going to be open to discussing anything sub 300.
Well, then you let him go to the free agent market, and then like is who's going to give him $300 million? Colorado Rockies? I
I
would
was
love to
about
see
to
him play. I
say
would love to see him play in
that
Colorado,
would be pretty
actually.
fun. That would be pretty fun. That would actually be a good investment by the Rockies, which they will not be spending that money.
They should I know that they try to, this is obviously not Blue Jays related, but I know the Rockies like try and kind of lean into the like we're gonna, play some good defense in our park, like have an outfield that can kind of range around and like take away the dimensions of course, but they should really just lean into dudes that hit nukes.
That is
Like we're
absolutely what
we're
they
just
should
gonna
do.
hit like 800 500 foot home runs in a year.
Yeah.
Like how
No,
fun would
that's what
that
they
be?
should do.
As like the Rockies draw really well, despite being like one of the worst franchises in baseball. Like their attendance is very consistent. But could you imagine how fun it would be to be a Rockies fan
Oh
if you
yeah.
were just rolling out like Jorge Soler, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Giancarlo Stanton on a nightly basis in the same lineup?
Yeah, I mean, it would be a bit of a mess defensively, but I guess at this point, everything's a mess for the Rockies. So,
You're gonna give up runs anyways.
yeah, pretty much.
All right, let's for the all-star thing, it's obviously great that Vlad's there, fourth time in a row. Um, I do think that he gets a little bit underrated as far as like a marketable star and like face of the league. Like I do think that he is that at that level as a player and like a face of like baseball is fun, kind of. Um, but I'm looking at the rest of this Blue Jays roster, like he's probably going to be the only one going.
I mean, once upon a time, it could have been a couple guys.
Yeah, I mean, Jose Barrios and Jimmy Garcia were certainly in the conversation. I think Danny Jansen, when he was, he the classic Danny Jansen, right? He comes off the IL, like absolutely rakes for a couple weeks, and then now we're really slowing down. But I mean, other than um Barrios and Garcia and their early season and how well they played, I mean, like Chris Bassett could be in the mix at this point,
I
but
would be pretty
his
surprised.
first month was
I
not
would be
great.
pretty surprised by Chris
Yeah.
Bassett if he got an all-star nod. It would be fun. I would be pretty sure he could be a guy that maybe is kind of a replacement, because there's always a handful of those
Yeah.
guys as well. But I think that you're probably only looking at Vladdy as your lone all-star representative. I just don't really see a universe where anybody else is in the mix. I mean, is IKF their second best player?
Well, by F War, he's been their best player.
I mean, IKF is not getting into an all-star game. He's been really effective. He's been everything the Blue Jays could have asked for and more. But especially given that he's hurt, he will not be in Arlington. I mean, that much feels safe to say.
He's also been their best player by B War, actually 3.1 B War for IKF.
3 WAR IKF.
He's already
That is
there.
on the record.
He's
Three
already
more
there.
IKF.
You know what's crazy about IKF, and I mean we can kind of change topics here with some of the recent injury news in Toronto. Obviously, IKF, basically the knee injury, like he felt something or tweaked something, and then he's talking like he said he's hoping to be back by mid-August, which is
Yeah, week to that's a crazy like
that's yeah
if we're talking week to week, that's awful for the Blue Jays. That's a huge loss. I didn't catch this mid-August thing though. That's a huge injury.
yeah. I mean I somebody had said I saw on Twitter. I wish I could remember who said it, but the fact that the Blue Jays released and they said that it was a knee injury when they pulled him out of the lineup instead of like a knee contusion or knee discomfort or something was a sign that like there was going to be a significant time away for him.
Yeah, which is just brutal for the Blue Jays. I mean, they're running out of time as it is if they're not already out of time. I mean, if you ask me, I think they're kind of out of time.
Well,
But I mean, to lose who is statistically your best player at this point of the season is just, icing on the cake. And but the cake's made out of garbage.
he had just came off a 13 game hit streak, which like, can you imagine the amount that we dumped on the IKF contract for
Oh
him
yeah.
to come out and be a 3-win player, a 2-win F4, 120 WRC plus guy, a guy who's stringing together 13 game hit streaks where he's hitting 438 with 3 home runs, driving in guys. Like I can't believe that the season got to this point, and then things have obviously not gone well along with that.
No, things have gone off the rails in every way, shape imaginable, right? But no, I think that the loss of IKF, and again, we'll get to the other injuries because I wouldn't even say that IKF is the biggest injury news of the last couple of weeks or even couple of days, right? This is a team that is battered and bruised and cannot afford to be that at this time, but is just running out of rope. I mean, you're trotting out Zach Pop in a high leverage spot, Nate Pearson in a high leverage spot, and these guys just aren't capable of playing in those big moments. You think about a guy like an Addison Barger. I think his OPS is sub 400, and you're going to have to continue to trot him out there when, to me, he just does not look like he's ready to go.
Yeah, I mean the Barger stuff has been certainly concerning, and I mean they've obviously pulled his playing time back a little bit. You look at the lineup today even, and I mean obviously Leo Jimenez is in there. Like Kiermaier's been playing more, I guess, and they're kind of running out like the same group at this point. Like it's kind of the thing that we saw earlier where it's like the like 11 guys are getting to play, and like the Bargers, the I guess it might be kind of just Barger's kind of slid into that 13th man on the roster spot, but yeah, it's tough for sure. And the bullpen stuff, I mean, Jordan Romano with the elbow surgery yesterday, down from throwing for 6 weeks, and I think we were talking about it before we hit record, like that pretty much takes him out for the rest of the year. Like really, really sucks there. Um Man, yeah, it's tough, and like that's one where teams had shown interest in him, and if he had pitched well, you could probably have gotten a decent package back. Or now you're going into 2025 with a pitcher who probably won't have thrown again in 2024, and there's not going to be a lot of trade value there if you do decide to blow it up. So you probably want him to recoup some of that value anyway. So now you're penciling him in next year as probably your closer once again, and you don't really know what you're going to get from him.
Yeah, I mean, we had said, as you mentioned before, hitting the record button, it was 6 weeks without throwing, and then who knows how long that he's got a rehab for. You're probably looking at him being back around mid-September at the best scenario, which is probably about 10 weeks, because you're looking at probably 6 weeks of no throwing. You're probably looking at 3 weeks of readjusting, and then you're probably looking at a week of rehab if there's even a minor league season to rehab during at that point in the season. So you're running out of rope with him. And at that point, you're looking at either trading him for pennies on the dollar because he's hurt and was not good when healthy this year, or you're holding on to him for next year, and he becomes an expiring reliever, and those just don't have the same value as a reliever with an extra year of control.
Yeah, I mean, we're obviously that's going to come into play with Jimmy Garcia here very soon, who is joining Buffalo this week. So good to see that, his rehab has gone well, and I think that that's probably for the Blue Jays. Like they're probably not rushing him back, but they're probably putting an urgency on him returning to the major league roster because you want him to show that he's healthy before the trade deadline. And hey, it'd be nice for the team to get a reliable arm in the bullpen. I mean, right now we talked about it a little bit, but like they're running out Zach Pop and Jose Cuas and uh Ryan Burr and obviously not on the major league roster, but like Brendan Little, Brown Francis got hit around a little bit. It's been
It's tough out there, brother. It's tough out there. Grab a
I'm
helmet.
I'm curious on your so let's enter a hypothetical world. So we are post trade deadline. So I feel like they are very much going to ride this thing out until the end and see what the team can do until the trade deadline. And so let's say post trade deadline, they move Jimmy Garcia and I mean, we didn't even talk about the Tim Mayza news. Tim Mayza designated for assignment. I'll let you sing about it after, but entering our hypothetical world here, post trade deadline, what do you want to see from the bullpen? Like there'll be no Jimmy Garcia, no Jordan Romano. Like I don't think there's any logical explanation for letting Jose Cuas and Zach Pop and Brendan Little throw innings when you've traded away a bunch of pieces.
Well, I mean, like you don't have any other arms. There's just not enough arms to get you to the end of the ball game. That's really the end of the conversation, right? And I mean, I recall earlier in the year how bad the bullpen had been, and it just hasn't gotten any better. And it's arguably gotten worse because everybody's been hurt. This is just a team that's lost any semblance of what was, I mean, going into the season, supposed to be one of the best bullpens in baseball. I recall a couple of months back, it was something that we had really highlighted as something that was going to be a huge part of the Blue Jays' success. It was going to be that the Jays bullpen was solid, and it was the question of would the offense pull its weight? Well, no, but also the pitching hasn't pulled its weight, but also the bullpen hasn't pulled its weight. You're kind of like from every angle, you're getting assaulted, and there's no end in sight. You're gonna have to trot out a Zach Pop. You're gonna have to trot out a Jose Cuas because what other options do you have to eat those innings?
Well, I mean, I put the list of minor league relievers that I think could be potential options at the major league level in our doc there. But I just on Zach Pop, like man, it's been a rough go for him. Like it has been it's so weird because like the blueprint is there for him to be a really good major league reliever. Like I think he's the Clay Holmes type, but like he just doesn't strike anybody out and just gets hit super hard. Like the way that with a sinker, the way that his is, I don't know how he's giving up over 2 home runs per nine.
Well, it's you beat it into the dirt. Like got a lot of movement, it's got a lot of velo, but you square it up and it just gets tagged. And that's
Yeah.
just the nature of the beast. Like I don't really have an answer. I'm not supposed to have an answer. Pete Walker and the Blue Jays are supposed to have an answer, but they clearly don't.
Yeah. It's at this point like I don't really like to talk about players this way, but I'm like pretty out on Zach Pop as a major league reliever. Like I think that at this point, like you got to be looking like I'll list off some of these names that I've listed down from the minor leagues, but like this is the point where we got to be there. Sorry, they got to be looking towards like the Connor Cooks, the Mason Fluhardys, the Hayden Yengers, like Hagen Danner when he's off the IL. Like those guys are all in AAA and all have been pitching relatively well. Connor Cook is like a sub 2 ERA since June 1st. So like I think it's time to the point where they need to be pretty ruthless with some of these relievers, like a Jose Cuas, like, hey man, you hit two guys in 3 pitches, like,
See ya.
sorry, you're on the bus down to Buffalo, and we're bringing up Connor Cook. I mean, even some of I listed some of these guys from Double A, like Jimmy Burnett, Ryan Boyer, Adrian Hernandez, TJ Brock, like they've all been throwing
But
well
the
as well.
but I just want to hit pause here for a second, because the fact that you're thinking about pulling a guy from double A ball to save your
Yeah.
bullpen, to me, it's indicative of just the lack of talent on this team.
I mean, I, I, I don't think that I would bring up somebody from Double A, like right from Double A to the majors. I don't think I'm calling Jimmy Burnett tomorrow to come up and save the Blue Jays season. Like I
But
think
it's
that's
still it's the fact that the, call it allure, call it whatever you want, of grabbing a question mark from the high minors. You you shouldn't be at that stage when you're supposed to be the Blue Jays and you're supposed to be competing, which at this point they're clearly not.
it's kind of funny because like so Steamer does like these projections, right? Where what they would be at the major league level. And for Zach Pop, like his rest of season stuff is okay. It has him at like a round of 4 ERA. Some Zips has him around like above a 5. Steamer has him at a 3.9. So, some all the other ones are kind of in between there. And then if I take a look at like Jimmy Burnett, who's in Double A, and his Steamer projection is better than some of Zach Pop's projections. And not that projection systems are everything, but you know, it does show to me that like some of the arm talent, like maybe you should be giving other guys a chance. Like maybe it was you like, why are you trading for Jose Cuas and Yuri Rodriguez when you can try out a Connor Cook or a Mason Fluharty at the major league level?
I think it's just a nature of the beast thing where you're looking for more arms. Don't forget all these injuries. They don't have as many arms available. So it's a depth thing too. But
Yeah.
at that, they're putting in worse arms than are available, it seems like, at other levels of the minor leagues.
Yeah, it's weird to me. Like, I mean, especially looking at like somebody like Mason Fluharty, who he has a 3.3 at AAA this year. That's over 40 innings. Like he's thrown in a ton of games for the Bisons and has been like a really, really effective lefty. And I think when they've been trying to solve the Tim Mayza question or the Brent or like having Brendan Little, like it just you have a 22-year-old who's uh, like maybe obviously they know better than I do about what makes a pitcher ready to pitch in the major leagues, and obviously they have stuff that they want to see. They're very, very, very patient when it comes to calling players up, as we've seen in the past. And I just think it'd be nice to like, hey, throw a kid like that a bone and be like, hey, we're gonna give you your shot. If it doesn't work, then you're gonna
Back to the minors with you.
back to
But I
triple A.
don't think
Yeah.
there's anything even really, there's no harm at this point. You're
Yeah.
really just scrambling for answers.
Oh man, it's tough out here. It's tough when I'm diving into the last month of how guys are pitching in Double A. It's tough. State of affairs are not great. Let's talk about Tim Mayza because a very tough decision for the team there. Longest tenured Blue Jay. He had been very excellent the past like 3 seasons. And by all accounts, great dude, great presence in the clubhouse, great teammate. It really sucks that it had to come down to this.
Totally. And it's a numbers game, and his numbers were not good enough. And it's a real shame. Just like the only guy I think on the Blue Jays still from those 2015, 2016 teams, if I recall correctly, and he was probably more of a kind of a extra body there, or perhaps he could have been in the 20. I'm trying to remember if he was on the 2016. Definitely wasn't 2015. But the point stands is that he kind of links these eras. But just a guy that, you know, by all accounts, a great dude, as you mentioned. And I would say again, just as was the case with Kevin Biggio, just so long. Thanks for all the memories, and it was a pleasure. but this is a team that's trying to win ball games, and he was not helping that.
No, I mean, like again, I can rhyme off some of the numbers where it's like an 8.03 ERA, 5.84 Ks per nine, 4.38 walks per nine. Like he just wasn't getting outs. He wasn't getting strikeouts, wasn't uh even, he'd been like a pretty good ground ball pitcher in the past. Like his career ground ball rate is over 50%. And this year he was generating ground balls at a 39.1% clip. So it's just, it wasn't there. The velo was down this season. And I think sometimes it's interesting. I think that we had talked about this, maybe not on the pod, but when you are a 32-year-old lefty who has pitched in the AL East for like 7 seasons and your pitch mix has never really changed, like, yeah, teams are probably going to figure that out a little bit. And for him, I don't know if that's something where maybe you just need to like add a cutter or mix in something other than a sinker slider when the teams you're facing have, like, how many times do you think Tim Mayza has faced Aaron Judge?
Probably, well, it's
I
either a
mean,
dozen
sorry, I
times
like
or probably like never because he's a
he's
lefty.
a
But
righty, but
the point stands is that he's facing these really talented AL East guys, right? The point
yeah,
stands.
yeah. I mean, like even if you think about it, like Tim Mayza versus Rafael Devers, like how many times do you think that matchup has come up?
Many, many, many.
Yeah, it's tough, and like I said, thanks for like you said, thanks for all the memories. Thanks for being one of the better left-handed pitchers in baseball for a few years. So tough, tough, tough business indeed, and I'm sure that decision was not easy for the Blue Jays. Let's keep moving on here. Interesting, like the trade stuff. I don't know when you really want to dive into the trade stuff, but Bo Bichette coming out and when he was asked, would you be surprised if you're traded? And him saying, no, not surprised at all. Um, any thoughts on that? I mean, his struggles have been crazy this year, and it doesn't quite surprise me that he would be ready to move on.
Yeah, we can dig into Bo a little bit here, and I've said it a couple times: the Chris Bryantification of him. This is just not the Bo Bichette that Blue Jays fans have been accustomed to seeing. He looks, frankly, kind of lost out there and looks unhappy. I mean, we saw it at the end of the ball game after he gets drilled, chucking his helmet. He was not happy with the umpire. He looked very displeased with himself. I mean, striking out on a hit by pitch is just nothing short of embarrassing. But it was pretty indicative of just the way the year has gone for him and the Blue Jays. And you said it, and I think it was Jeff Blair that said it, but change of scenery candidates, take it or leave it. But if there was anybody that could be one, it seems like it's Bo. Now, are you going to get a fair package for him at this point? And B, are you going to trade him because is it worth it for you to trade him? Those are questions that the Blue Jays are going to have to contemplate over the next 3 weeks. But the more I think about it, the more I wonder if the answer to both of those is yes, he should be traded.
Yeah, he's such an interesting case because like he's a very good baseball player and we just haven't seen that this year. Um, but I mean, what approach do you take with him, right? Like it's just I obviously Bob Nightingale. I mean, his report the other day was that they're gonna run it back with Bo and Vlad next year, and that they're gonna trade all of the expirings. Like, I guess that makes sense to me, but if Bo is checked out, like that's maybe an off-season conversation. Like, I feel like he's maybe more of an off-season trade than you got to figure out what
Well, the
makes
thing
sense
is
for him
too
in the
is
next 2 weeks.
the thing is too is, I mean, what was it? Christopher Morel was the guy last year that reportedly
Yeah.
was. So what kind of return are you even getting for him if you trade him this offseason?
Well, I don't think the Cubs are trading for him anymore. Like they're kind of in the Blue Jays level of like disappointing teams this year as far as their playoff odds are below 6%. Obviously the Blue Jays are a little lower than that. But I mean, who's are the Dodgers? Are they making a play for Bo? Like, I
I
mean,
mean, with Mookie out, maybe
yeah,
now, but he's not out for the year. He's just out for a couple more weeks, right?
yeah.
So, and it sounds like they were pretty comfortable with Mookie at short, even though he's not obviously a shortstop.
Yeah, I mean, like just kind of looking around baseball, like who would need that level of a shortstop that you can talk yourself into or what organization needs a shortstop that would be able to talk themselves into trading for him? Just kind of looking like the Orioles, they got Gunnar Henderson. The Yankees, they got Bo Bichette. The Red Sox,
Sorry, the Yankees have Volpe.
who did I say?
You said Bo Bichette.
Sorry. They do not have Bo Bichette actually, and I don't think that they will have Bo Bichette ever. But you never know. The Red Sox, like I could maybe see that, but I doubt that they would talk themselves into
And
making that
don't forget
trade.
they've invested all this money in Trevor Story, who's out for the year, right? But that
Yeah,
would mean that next year, presumably, Trevor Story's back and playing in the middle infield, right? Or he's
yeah,
got sit down Rafaela, who I know plays some outfield, but he also plays some infield. There's
yeah,
too many options for them. Forget about that.
yeah.
The Rays, forget about them. We could go through the whole list
I
if you
mean,
want.
I
Yeah, at least
so
forget the AL Central.
Cleveland Guardians, obviously they're not making the move. I like they could probably use a shortstop. Braden Rocchio has actually been like kind of sneaky this season, but they're not trading for Bo Bichette. Let's be honest.
No.
They're 20 games above 500. I think they're going to be fairly happy with where they're at and not need to make a massive trade. The Twins, they got Carlos Correa. You're not paying another shortstop. The Phillies got Trey Turner. The Braves, um, the
I mean,
Braves,
just look at the playoff teams, right? Like that's really what
yeah,
it is, right? And to me, I don't think that anybody other than call it the Dodgers is in desperate need of a guy because it's a position that normally it's a prerequisite to be
yeah, a good
that
team.
good. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that's definitely like an off-season conversation for sure.
for
And
sure.
especially if they're already putting it out there that like either you're gonna give us a king's ransom or we are going to hold on to him because you still have the year of control.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really just a question of what the Blue Jays want to do with him. You
Yeah.
can't walk into free agency. It's just not an option. But is he going to bounce back next year? I'm not sure.
I mean, we talked about it a little bit with Joey when he was on it, as far as like using the Willie Adames framework for how you approach Bo Bichette, and obviously different profile of player for sure. But the Brewers are obviously happy enough to or take Willie Adames to free agency this year and lose him as long as they win the division and make the playoffs. Like if the Jays bounce back next year and play well enough to make the playoffs, like are you fine with taking Bo on another playoff run and then losing him?
I think that it's too early to say, and I don't think you can operate under that assumption given how poorly this year has gone.
Yeah, we'll get into I think we kind of did it last week talking about like what 2025 will hold, and I'm sure that we'll talk about it a bunch coming forward. But 2025 is in a totally different like universe of like what it's going to look like, and we really don't know what that's going to look like until they make their moves at this deadline and kind of make some decisions on dudes on the roster that have years of control next season.
I think that right now there's a lot of question marks, a lot of opacity, and we will get some clarity probably within the next 20 to 25 days.
Yeah. Yep. I agree with that for sure. Before we run, let's do a quick minor league update rundown because obviously I think that it might be worth paying some attention to the minor league system this year. Obviously, it's not in a great spot, but some nice stories. I mean, Fernando Perez, he's a 20-year-old righty who got named to the future games or futures game roster, and he's the only Blue Jay that'll be there. But really nice story. He's been having a nice year in Dunedin, and he's kind of a guy that I'm sure will be rocketing up prospect lists this year. I don't know if you have any thoughts on Fernando Perez getting the call to the Futures game.
No, definitely exciting. I'm not going to pretend I'm as in depth and as knowledgeable on this as you are because I know you're locked in on this kind of stuff. But I did see somewhere one of the younger guys at the game, if not one of the youngest pitchers that'll be represented at the Futures game. And for a team that's had a lot of problems with its pitching prospects of late, Ricky Tiedemann comes to mind, although he's slowly creeping back into the picture. Nice to have a positive story.
Yes. Yes, no doubt about that. And it's kind of funny when you like think like the future stars rosters are always pretty funny to me because like I mean you think like last year Sam Robersa was one of the Blue Jays at the game and like he's
No
no longer a
disrespect,
Blue
Sam
Jay.
Roberta, but yeah, it's not
Maybe they can trade Jimmy Garcia for him.
I I wouldn't be shocked, but I also would be very surprised.
Anyways, one other thing I think pretty notable with the minor league system was the Vancouver Canadians going on a 9-game win streak. Really interesting. Like I've watched a lot of Vancouver games this year just based on the timing. Like it works out really nicely with them being on the West Coast and everything. And the team is like they don't have the biggest names, we'll say that, but they've been obviously very good since the season turned to the second half. Peyton Williams returning has been a really interesting story. Lazaro Estrada has been excellent for them, and they've just kind of been plugging along, and they're getting some really interesting names. I mean, Juwan Watts Brown, the Blue Jays third round pick last year, he recently got called or moved up to Vancouver. Connor O'Halloran, the Canadian pitcher out of Michigan that they drafted last year, has been pitching there, and he's had some really good starts. So like a really interesting team there for sure. And the 9-game win streak originally reported as a franchise best, but it was in fact not a franchise best. But
That's such a minor league ball story to be like, it's our franchise. Actually, oh, there's some mixed up records, and because of the affiliation switches, and it just felt very minor league ball, but very, very fun story. But yeah, it's great to see some success in the Blue Jays org. Of course, last year the Canadians had some success as well. This is a team that the Blue Jays have consistently relied on to develop talent. And I think that the hope is that you're able to have a couple of these guys become pieces. They're so low on the minor league level in terms of the rungs of the ladder that most of the big names are elsewhere because that's just not where big names necessarily always go through. But I mean, I think you mentioned Dromas Brown, like there's guys there that you can get excited about.
Yeah, and I mean, as far as like players like within the consciousness of the Toronto Blue Jays organization, like Desan Brown, Jace Borfin, um, that's as far as the list goes. But like, I mean, those guys are playing well, and yeah, the Vancouver team has really turned it around, and we'll see if they can maybe repeat as Northwest champions. Potentially, some additions coming from the draft.
That would be a welcome sight because this Blue Jays team looks anything but that at the major league level. And the draft, by the way, coming up soon. Very exciting.
Yeah,
It's
well,
only
we'll have
about
to
10
do
days away.
like a draft preview episode for
We will
sure.
definitely be doing that.
That'll be fun. All right, well, we're gonna run. Thank you so much for tuning in. Enjoy the games today. You can follow us on YouTube and subscribe. We're there at the Bird's Eye View Podcast. Make sure to follow or review wherever you get your pods. You can follow us all on Twitter. I'm at Worden_Zach. Jory is at J Negin-Shecter, and the pod is at BEV_pod. Thanks so much for listening, and happy Independence Day.